Je m'appelle Staci. Je parle un petit peu de français. Shia Shia means little little. So if somebody asks if I speak Arabic, I'll just say Arabic or Arab Shia Shia. Hi, my name is Staci Davenport. I'm a family medicine doctor at Very Adventist Hospital in Chad. I moved to Chad in December of 2018. I have a dog named Agnes. She's part German Shepherd and part a mix. I also have a cat. She was a Christmas gift from Olin and Danae Netteberg, my first Christmas in Beret. One of my favorite places to go in Chad, just to get away from the hospital and relax a little bit, is to go out to the river. So we've done a couple of river trips where we take either a canoe or a paddleboard and paddle down the river, find a place to camp on the riverbank, try to avoid the hippos. Yeah, some people don't touch the water because of the parasites, but it's hard to go too long without swimming when it's over 100 degrees and you don't have air conditioning. And it's one way to cool off. We did see a hippo when we were on our canoe trip, but thankfully it was the fishermen who were a ways ahead of us that actually aggravated the hippo into coming out of the water. They paddled away and we stayed on the side of the riverbank and avoided any serious encounters with the hippo. We do see patients sometimes with hippo bites, especially fishermen sometimes throwing their net, not realizing there's a hippo there. They're very territorial. I think anyone who first visits Chad from here has some culture shock at first, since it's very different in a lot of ways. Especially if you've never been to Africa, a lot of people say, I had no idea that people lived like this. Some of the previous missionaries told us people are living here the way people have lived for thousands of years. But definitely as you're just driving down the road and you see a small village with a cluster of huts with thatched roofs and small courtyards and the livestock kind of running around the courtyards and the huts, it feels very different from, Southern California. It's a very community-oriented culture. And maybe that's something we notice more actually with reverse culture shock, as we get used to sort of the community there and how much everyone is involved in everyone's lives in that village sort of culture where you can just go up to anyone else's hut, and if they're sick, you have to make sure to go and visit them. You can't walk down the street without greeting people. That's very important there. If you pass somebody on the street and you don't greet them first, they might say, pas de salutation? No greeting? It's very important to greet people, very important to ask about their family and maybe even about their livestock, about their home, you have to ask how everything is going in their life. And that's just part of the greeting. That's the beginning of the conversation. One of the adjustments is getting used to the hierarchy, and you're supposed to know who's important, and you're supposed to treat each person differently based on how important they are. And so you have to know, you don't just go up and shake the hand of the sous-prefet. That's not respectful enough, it's not deferential enough. So you might just go and greet him and say, bonjour sous-prefet. If you're in a meeting with a lot of important people, if you're getting up to speak, you have to greet each person in order of their importance with their title. So that can be very hard for the foreigners sometimes to remember who all is there and what their title is and acknowledge them in order. Another difference that was hard for us is that being interrupted is very normal. You could be talking to somebody, but someone else comes up, and since it's so important to greet people, you have to greet that person. So even though you were already talking to this person, you have to stop and greet the new person before you go back to that conversation. Especially as a doctor, sometimes that's hard, because I might be doing a consult with a patient, but then another patient or a family member comes up to me and wants me to take care of their family member. And they would just expect that I would stop talking to the consult that I'm doing to address them before going back to it. So sometimes to us that can feel less efficient or frustrating sometimes, but we have to sort of adjust and learn. I think that's a big part of being a missionary wherever you go, is figuring out what the social norms are and trying to adjust to them. Because they're not there to adjust to us. We're there to figure out how to live in their culture. Barry Adventist Hospital is a small rural hospital. It's about 100 beds, although saying how many beds the hospital has sort of feels like an artificial measure of its size, since most of the patients don't really stay in beds and they prefer to be outside where it's cooler and there's a breeze, and set out a mat under the mango tree, and that's sort of their bed. If I do rounds on the pediatric service, mostly I'm going from mat to mat on the ground instead of from bed to bed in the ward. I'm the medical director there. I also cover the maternity service, see outpatients, sometimes cover the pediatric and the medicine services. So we have a pediatric service, internal medicine service, maternity, and surgery. We also have a private ward. Some patients want to pay extra for their hospitalization to have a private room, so that helps subsidize the cost of some of the other free care that we give. So we have a private ward. We see outpatients, and we also do quite a bit of surgery. There are not very many surgeons in Chad, and not a lot of opportunity for residency training for the doctors that are in Chad. So having a place to have a safe surgery done is pretty rare in Chad. And Danae, being an OBGYN, she really improved the maternity service and the reputation for the maternity service. In a lot of other hospitals in Chad, they will tell the patients, once you've had a C-section, you always have to have another C-section, which can be really hard in Chad, where the women are expected to have so many babies. If you try to counsel a woman about her reproductive life plan, how many kids does she want to have? You know, some of them will say 15, and some will say as many as God gives me. And having a lot of babies, on the one hand, it's something that sort of improves their status, but in another way, it's also just very practical in a place where a lot of kids don't live beyond age 5. It's a practical matter that the women want to have a lot of babies, to have a lot of children also that survive. To have Danae come and tell them, you can actually have a normal delivery, even though you've had one C-section before. That's really encouraging to women. So we actually have patients come from far away saying, this hospital where I live told me I need a C-section, but I heard in Barre I can actually have a normal delivery, so I came all the way to Barre. Yeah, we've done a lot of remodeling, a lot of upgrades of things in the last few years. The hospital has been there since the 70s. A lot of the buildings aren't actually there since the 70s, but some of them are still getting pretty old in certain areas. The operating room that we were operating in when I arrived is the same one that they had been using for many years. And it was only one operating room, and it definitely was showing its age a little bit. In 2012, when they added a lot of new buildings, sort of in the one-day church style. They added a new maternity ward, labor and delivery room, new operating room, the private ward, and a lot of the houses. So the house that I'm living in was part of that project in 2012. So the shell for the operating room was built at that time, but the interior walls and the outfitting of that building wasn't done until just a couple of years ago. In the fall of 2021, we finished getting those 2 operating rooms ready to actually operate in, just in time for a surgical campaign with the visiting plastic surgeon. So at the end of 2021, we actually started using those 2 new operating rooms, which was really helpful, because in the old operating room, if we had 2 cases at the same time, we had to just put up a curtain inside the operating room and have the smaller case done on the gurney on the side while the bigger case happened on the operating table. Much better to have 2 operating rooms, so that if there's a long general surgery case and at the same time I need to do a C-section, I can go into the room B and do the C-section instead of having to share an operating room. The medical auxiliary donated money specifically to upgrade our operating suite. So that helped us to get that operating room ready to use in the end of 2021. Having an upgraded surgery suite is helpful for our surgeons. They appreciate having a little bit more updated environment to work in. It helps a lot of our patients. Like I said, a lot of our patients come from far away just to have safe surgery. Mundu, the nearest big city, is several hours away, and Jamena, the capital, is a couple of hours by motorcycle and then another 9 hours by bus, and a lot of our patients can't afford that trip. So to have a hospital in their district that's able to do surgery and do it safely makes a huge difference for their health. We've done a lot of other upgrades to the hospital over the last few years. The medical auxiliary has given multiple donations to us that have helped with some of the projects. So those funds, in combination with some other grants and some other donors, we've accomplished quite a bit over the last several years as far as remodeling and buying new equipment. We did some remodeling of the medicine ward, again, to make it a little bit stronger and keep water from flooding in during rainy season. We also just finished a project replacing the wiring going between the buildings, redone all of the wiring inside the buildings, but now we do have large enough cables to handle the electrical current going from our generators to each of the main buildings of the hospital and the housing. We also purchased 2 new generators. The older ones were basically beyond the lifespan that they were expected to keep functioning, and we'd had to replace significant parts of them multiple times. Donations help us do a lot of what we do, especially since our patient population doesn't make a lot of money. It's a very low income population. A lot of the workers that go out and work in the rice fields make less than $1 for half a day of working in the rice field. It helps a lot to have donations come from outside to support that work. The local population can't necessarily afford to pay prices that would provide the sort of medication and equipment and supplies that we really need to give them the standard of medical care that everyone in the world really deserves to have. Thank you to the Medical Auxiliary, and thank you to all of the alumni who have supported us with donations or coming to visit and volunteer at Berry. That makes a big difference for what we're able to do for our patients. We also appreciate your support in prayers as you're praying for Berry. Pray for our patients and pray for our staff, the missionaries who are there, and the others who might be considering coming. We are always looking to have more people come and join us.